Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. After the main character dies inside of his previous life, he wakes up as Rick inside of the multiverse. What is Rick gonna do inside of the multiverse?
Multiverse. Reborn as Rick Sanchez. Connect Marvel with DC. Chapter 1. A meeting that wasn't scheduled. I died because a truck ran a red light. That was it. No build-up. No last words. No slow-motion moment where I reflected on my life and realized something profound. Just metal, glass, pain, and then nothing. Then awareness snapped back into place, like a switch flipped too hard. My eyes opened to a ceiling I had only ever seen on a screen. Circular lights, stainless steel, floating holograms humming softly in the air, the smell of ozone and alcohol, the low vibration of machinery that felt tuned to my bones. I inhaled sharply and sat up. Oh, for F! I stopped myself mid-sentence because the voice that came out of my mouth wasn't mine. It was Rick Sanchez's voice. Gravelly, fast, annoyed by default, like every word was late for something better. I froze. My hands were wrong, long fingers, calloused in familiar places I had never earned. Blue drool stained the sleeve of a white lab coat hanging open over a pale chest, my chest. I looked down slowly, carefully, like the body might argue back. Lab coat, brown pants, belt with gadgets I recognized instantly, boots scuffed in the exact way I had seen 1,000 times. "Oh my God," I said, and the voice said it like it was already tired of being right. "Nope, nope, nope, nope." I swung my legs off the table and stood. The room shifted slightly as my balance recalibrated muscle memory snapping into place without asking permission. I walked to a reflective panel and stared. Spiky blue hair, unimpressed unibrow, permanent look of irritation carved into every line of the face. Rick Sanchez stared back at me. I pressed 2 fingers into my temple, breathing slowly. "I'm dead," I said. "I got hit by a truck and now I'm Rick Sanchez. Of course I am. That tracks, that's fair." My brain felt full, not confused, not panicked, just layered. Like someone had dropped a library on top of my own memories, and my mind had decided to alphabetize it instantly. Rick's intelligence was there, not arriving, already present. Equations lined up behind my thoughts without effort. Dimensional constants sat comfortably next to memories of my old apartment, my phone, my job. I remembered everything. My life, my death, and every episode of Rick and Morty. And my stomach dropped slightly. Every movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And DC. I walked toward a console without thinking and tapped a few controls. The holographic displays responded instantly, reading my intent more than my touch. Location data scrolled past. New York City. Temporal alignment, 2012. External threat analysis, flagged in aggressive red. Chitauri invasion. I sighed and rubbed my face. "Oh, come on," I said flatly. "I don't even live here." The lab was Rick's garage. Too clean, too advanced. Stark-level tech, but tweaked, borrowed, modified, improved. I recognized the layout instantly. Avengers Tower. I glanced out through a reinforced glass wall, just in time to see a massive portal rip open in the sky over Manhattan. Sleek alien craft poured through it like insects from a nest. Chitauri. People screamed far below. Explosions echoed between buildings. Repulsor fire streaked upward from somewhere to my left. I leaned against the console and stared out, expression flat. "Yeah, no," I said. "I'm not doing this." A memory surfaced effortlessly. Rick's portal gun schematics folded neatly in my mind. I could build one in under a minute. I already knew where half the parts were in this room. I grabbed a container of popcorn from a nearby food synthesizer. Stark really overdid it with the creature comforts, and shoved a handful into my mouth as I walked to an open area of the lab. Okay, I said around a crunch. Plan, outsource. I pulled a familiar green and black portal gun from a drawer I hadn't checked but knew was there. Thumbed it on. The hum felt comforting. I dialed coordinates without hesitation. DC Earth, Prime, Justice League Watchtower, Conference Room. The portal snapped open in midair, a stable oval of green energy buzzing softly. On the other side, the Justice League was in the middle of a meeting. Batman stood near a holographic table, arms crossed. Superman hovered just above the floor, listening. Wonder Woman stood with her hands clasped behind her back. Flash leaned awkwardly against a chair he wasn't supposed to be touching. Green Lantern sat with his feet up, earning a look from Batman. They all turned toward the portal at once. I leaned halfway through it, popcorn bucket tucked under one arm. Hey, I said casually. So, some bad people are hurting a lot of people over here. They stared. Superman's eyes narrowed slightly, not hostile, just assessing. Who are you? He asked. Rick Sanchez, I replied. Genius, alcoholic, not your problem. Anyway, aliens, big hole in the sky, New York City, people screaming. You guys seem like you're into that. Batman's gaze flicked to the portal edges, scanning, calculating. Why should we trust you? He asked. I shrugged. Don't, I said. But if you don't go, a lot of civilians die. If you do go, you punch some aliens. Either way, I'm eating popcorn. There was a brief silence. Superman glanced at Wonder Woman. She gave a small nod. We can help, Superman said. Yeah, obviously, I replied. That's your whole brand. Superman stepped through the portal first. The watchtower vanished behind him, replaced by open sky and smoke-choked air above Manhattan. The sound hit immediately, screams, explosions, alien weapons firing. Superman's expression hardened. He flew. The rest followed in rapid succession. Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, Batman grappling through last with a controlled glide. I stepped fully back into Avengers Tower and closed the portal behind them, leaning against the railing overlooking the city. I shoveled popcorn into my mouth and watched. Superman hit the Chitauri like a force of nature. He tore through their ranks effortlessly, ripping armored soldiers apart, smashing flying units out of the air faster than they could react. Thousands fell in seconds, their formations collapsing instantly. Flash zipped through streets below, disarming ground forces faster than the eye could track. Wonder Woman waded into the thick of it, shield up, blade precise, methodical. Green Lantern created massive constructs, sweeping entire waves of Chitauri aside. Batman moved differently, targeted strikes, shutting down command units, relaying information through his comms. The Avengers noticed almost immediately. Iron Man streaked past Superman, did a double take midair, and nearly clipped a building. Tony Stark said over open comms. Cap, you seeing this? Captain America stared up from the street, shield raised, watching Superman punch a Leviathan out of the sky. I'm seeing it, Steve replied slowly. Thor landed nearby, Mjolnir crackling, eyes narrowed in curiosity rather than alarm. These are not of this realm, Thor said. No kidding, Tony replied. Add it to the list. I stayed where I was. Didn't move, didn't help, didn't interfere. Just watched. Batman reached the portal generator atop Stark Tower within minutes. He examined it briefly, fingers flying over controls he hadn't seen before, but understood well enough. Stark, Batman said through comms, I can close this. Please do, Tony replied. That thing is ruining the skyline. Batman shut it down cleanly. The portal collapsed in on itself with a thunderous crack. The Chitauri invasion ended almost immediately after. 10 minutes, maybe less. Smoke drifted through the streets. Emergency sirens filled the air. The city was battered but standing. The Avengers regrouped. The Justice League landed nearby. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Steve Rogers stepped forward first. "I'm Captain America," he said. "Thanks for the assist." Superman nodded. "Superman, happy to help." Tony glanced between them, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "So," he said, "parallel universes are officially a thing now, right?" Batman's gaze lifted briefly toward Avengers Tower. I waved with 2 fingers from the balcony and tossed another piece of popcorn into my mouth. They talked, compared notes, established basic understanding. No speeches, no grand statements. Steve and Superman spoke briefly about coordination, about responsibility. Neither argued loudly. Just firm, respectful disagreement turning into agreement to work together if this ever happened again. Eventually, the Justice League prepared to leave. Another portal opened. The Avengers followed them through, curiosity overriding caution. I stayed behind. I finished the popcorn. Chapter 2. Overlords Don't RSVP. I got bored. That was really it. No greater motivation. No lingering sense of responsibility. New York was done screaming, the Avengers were busy playing interdimensional exchange students, and the Justice League had already gone back to their very shiny satellite with their very serious faces. I stood alone in Avengers Tower for about 30 seconds before my foot started tapping. "Yeah, no," I said quietly. "I'm not hanging around for debriefs." I slapped a button on the portal gun and stepped through without looking back. Space was quiet in the way that felt wrong if you thought about it too much. Stars burned in clean silence. Massive shapes drifted slowly, obeying rules they never questioned. I floated just outside the gravitational edge of a dead moon, hands in my coat pockets, lab coat fluttering slightly from inertial dampeners I wasn't consciously maintaining. I already knew where he was. Thanos didn't hide, not really. He positioned himself where power liked to be noticed. His flagship hung in space like a monument to ego, dark metal, brutal lines, no attempt at elegance. A throne room with engines. My eyes narrowed, and I felt something sharp and bright flicker behind them. "Oh," I said softly, smiling despite myself. "You." I opened a portal directly onto the bridge. The Chitauri guards barely had time to turn before I stepped through, boots clanking against polished metal. Thanos sat on his throne, massive hands resting on the armrests, expression calm, unreadable. This was before the stones, before Earth mattered to him personally, still confident, still patient. He looked at me. "You are not one of mine," Thanos said evenly. "No kidding," I replied, strolling forward and glancing around. "Wow, very intimidating. Lots of black, big chair, compensating for something, or is this just your vibe?" The guards tensed. Thanos raised one hand slightly. They froze. "You speak boldly," he said, "for someone unarmed." I lifted the portal gun slightly and shrugged. "Buddy, I'm armed with boredom and bad ideas. You're lucky I didn't bring snacks." Thanos studied me more carefully now. His eyes narrowed just a fraction. "You are not from this universe," he said. "Gold Star," I replied happily. "Okay, field trip time." Before he could respond, I opened another portal behind him. Not space. Stone. Firelight. A vast arena carved into obsidian, surrounded by towering, jagged structures and massive, empty thrones. Apocalypse. Darkseid stood at the center of the arena, arms behind his back, stone face turned upward as the portal snapped open. Thanos fell through it. He landed hard, boots cracking the stone beneath him, immediately rising into a guarded stance. Darkseid turned slowly. The air felt heavier just being near him. His eyes glowed faintly, but he did not raise his voice. "You bring chaos to my world," Darkseid said. I stepped through last, holding a microphone I had pulled from somewhere that absolutely did not make sense. "Okay," I said cheerfully, clapping once. "Gentlemen, welcome. You are, by popular opinion, which I just invented, both the big bad overlords of your respective universes." Thanos looked from Darkseid to me, expression flat but alert. Darkseid's gaze locked onto me now. "You summon me without permission," Darkseid said. "Yeah," I replied easily. "That's kind of my thing." I raised the microphone and spoke louder, voice echoing cleanly across the arena. "Let's see who's the strongest of them all." Silence. Long, heavy silence. Thanos straightened slightly. Darkseid did not move. They looked at each other, then back at me. "We do not fight for your amusement," Thanos said coldly. Darkseid's voice was lower, more final. "There is no purpose in this." I blinked, then sighed. "Oh, come on," I said, lowering the mic. "I went through a lot of trouble. Do you know how hard it is to get you two in the same room without some cosmic artifact involved?" Neither of them moved. Thanos folded his arms slowly. Darkseid's eyes dimmed slightly, unimpressed. I scratched the back of my head. "Well," I said, "that's disappointing." I snapped my fingers. A portal ripped open above the arena. Something massive fell through it. It hit the ground like a meteor. Stone exploded outward. Shockwaves rippled across the arena floor. Dust and debris shot into the air. Doomsday rose from the crater, with a roar that vibrated through bone and steel alike. Jagged grey flesh, bone protrusions, eyes burning with animal fury. Thanos shifted his stance immediately. Darkseid's eyes flared brighter. I floated up and drifted lazily toward a raised spectator platform that hadn't existed a second ago, but did now. A chair formed beneath me as I sat, legs crossed, microphone resting against my knee. "Okay," I said with satisfaction. "Now we're cooking." Doomsday lunged. Thanos moved first, sidestepping with surprising speed and slamming a fist into Doomsday's side. The impact echoed like thunder, sending Doomsday skidding across the stone. Darkseid raised one hand. Omega beams fired instantly, striking Doomsday square in the chest and driving him backward in a continuous blast of red energy. Doomsday roared, digging claws into the ground, resisting. Thanos glanced toward Darkseid. "For now," Thanos said, voice controlled, "we cooperate." Darkseid did not respond verbally. He stepped forward instead, fists clenched, posture heavy with intent. Doomsday adapted almost immediately. His skin hardened where the Omega beams struck. He surged forward again, faster now, slamming into Thanos and driving him backward across the arena. I leaned forward slightly in my seat, eyes bright. "Oh yeah," I said quietly, pleased. "There it is." Thanos grabbed Doomsday's arm mid-swing, muscles bulging as he resisted the brute force. Darkseid closed the distance and struck Doomsday across the head with enough force to crack the ground beneath them. Doomsday staggered, then laughed, a broken animal sound, and retaliated with a headbutt that sent Darkseid skidding back several meters. The arena shook with every movement. I adjusted in my seat, resting my chin on one hand. "No stones," I muttered thoughtfully. "No anti-life, just raw stats. Love a clean matchup." Doomsday adapted again. Spikes elongated, musculature shifted. His resistance grew visibly stronger with each exchange. Thanos grunted as Doomsday landed a blow square in his chest, sending him crashing into a pillar. He rose immediately, wiping dust from his chin, expression darker now. Darkseid hovered briefly, then descended with a downward strike that drove Doomsday into the ground again. The fight escalated rapidly. Energy blasts, shockwaves, stone reduced to rubble. I watched closely, eyes tracking every movement, brain already cataloging outcomes I wasn't planning to share. Nope, I said softly as Doomsday started regenerating faster. That's gonna be a problem. Doomsday rose again, roaring louder than before, body already changing to counter their attacks. Thanos and Darkseid stood several meters apart now, both facing the same enemy. For the moment, they were aligned. I leaned back, hands behind my head, expression satisfied. All right, I said, voice echoing lightly across the arena. Let's see how long that teamwork lasts. Chapter 3, Cooperation Under Pressure. The arena floor was already broken in more places than it was intact. Chunks of obsidian floated for a second before gravity caught up and pulled them down again. Dust hung in the air in a thick layer that made the lights from Apocalypse look duller. The outer walls were still standing, but the clean lines had been ruined by impact craters and long cracks that ran like scars through the stone. I stayed in my seat on the raised platform, legs crossed, one arm draped along the backrest like I owned the place. I could have fixed the arena with a thought. I could have paused time. I could have put Doomsday in a box and mailed him to the sun. I didn't. I watched. Doomsday moved again, and the sound came before the impact. His feet hit the ground hard enough that the stone flexed. He charged straight between Thanos and Darkseid, forcing them to react instead of plan. Thanos shifted his weight and met him head-on, shoulders squared, fists up. He didn't flinch. He didn't waste motion. He caught Doomsday's forearm, twisted, and tried to wrench the limb out of alignment. Doomsday's elbow bent the wrong way for a split second and snapped back with a wet pop that made me grin in spite of myself. "Oh, that's disgusting," I said pleasantly, resting my chin on my knuckles. Doomsday didn't care. He headbutted Thanos with a brutal forward slam. Thanos' boot slid back across the stone, carving two grooves. He didn't fall, but his jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. He drove a knee upward into Doomsday's midsection. Doomsday's ribs flexed and then hardened, like his body was deciding it didn't like that input anymore. He grabbed Thanos by the shoulders and threw him. Thanos crossed the arena in a blink and smashed into a pillar. The pillar snapped in half. The upper section toppled and exploded into fragments. Thanos stepped out of the debris slowly, posture still controlled, but his breathing had changed. Not heavy, just different, like he'd recalculated. Darkseid didn't waste time watching. He raised his hand and fired Omega beams again, not as a continuous burn this time, but as sharp, cutting bursts meant to force Doomsday to move. The beams hit Doomsday's shoulder, then his thigh, then his chest. Each strike pushed Doomsday back a step. Then Doomsday stopped being pushed. His feet dug into the ground. His posture lowered. He roared, and the sound bounced off the arena walls hard enough to make loose debris jump. The next Omega beam hit him square in the torso. Doomsday's skin around the impact point shifted. It didn't burn the same way as before. The red energy scattered slightly, as if his body had started rejecting the shape of the attack. Darkseid's eyes brightened, irritation showing in the small tightening at the corners. Thanos looked at Doomsday's chest, and then at Darkseid. "He adapts," Thanos said evenly. Darkseid's voice stayed flat. "I see." Doomsday lunged at Darkseid. Darkseid met him with a straight punch that cracked the air. Doomsday's head snapped to the side, and his body staggered. Then he swung wildly, catching Darkseid across the ribs. Darkseid slid back, boots grinding through rubble. Thanos came in from the side and slammed both fists into Doomsday's back. Doomsday stumbled forward, and Darkseid capitalized immediately. He grabbed Doomsday by the throat with one hand and lifted him, not with effort but with an ugly certainty, like weight didn't matter. Doomsday clawed at Darkseid's wrist. His claws scraped against stone-like skin and sparked. Darkseid tightened his grip. Doomsday's neck bones shifted. Then Doomsday's shoulders bulged and spikes pressed outward from beneath his skin, growing fast, forcing Darkseid's hand to adjust. The spikes drove into Darkseid's palm shallowly, enough to draw a thin line of blood. Darkseid's eyes flared. For the first time, something like annoyance showed clearly on his face. He hurled Doomsday into the ground, so hard the arena floor cratered inward. Thanos stepped forward, measuring the moment, then dropped into the crater and started hitting Doomsday with short, heavy blows meant to break structure rather than cause pain. Thanos didn't rage. He worked. Doomsday took the first few hits, then started moving under them, arms rising, blocking, catching. He grabbed Thanos' wrist and squeezed. Thanos' forearm armor creaked. Thanos' expression didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened again. He rotated his arm in a smooth motion and drove an elbow into Doomsday's face. Doomsday's head snapped back. Thanos followed with another blow, then another. Doomsday's face thickened. Bone ridges shifted across his cheek and brow as if his skull was reinforcing. Darkseid stepped into the crater and fired Omega beams point blank at Doomsday's head. The beams hit. The crater lit red for a fraction of a second. When the light faded, Doomsday was still there. Smoke curled off his shoulders. His eyes were wilder, more focused. His skin had darkened around the impact, dense and uneven. He surged upward and slammed both hands into the crater walls, pushing himself out in a burst of force that launched rubble outward like shrapnel. Thanos and Darkseid both moved back instinctively. I leaned forward a little more, my mouth slightly open. I felt my heart rate tick up, not because I was scared, but because this was finally getting interesting. Doomsday landed on the arena floor and immediately charged again, faster than before. Darkseid fired Omega beams to redirect him. Doomsday moved through them. Not immune, not untouched, but committed. He pushed through the damage, shoulders rolling, body already rebuilding as he advanced. Darkseid met him with a two-handed strike to the chest that would have pulped most things. Doomsday absorbed it, staggered, then grabbed Darkseid's forearm and pulled him in, slamming his forehead into Darkseid's face with a hard, ugly hit. Darkseid's head snapped back slightly. He recovered instantly and drove his knee into Doomsday's torso. Thanos came in again and wrapped his arms around Doomsday's waist from behind, trying to anchor him. Doomsday threw his weight backward and slammed Thanos into the ground behind him. The impact shook my seat platform enough to rattle the armrest. Thanos rolled up smoothly. Doomsday's arm whipped around and caught him across the jaw. Thanos slid across broken stone and came to a stop near the arena wall. He rose slower this time, not sluggish, just deliberate, and wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at the smear of dark blood on his knuckles. His expression stayed controlled, but his eyes hardened. Darkseid stood a few meters away, posture still upright, shoulders squared, but his gaze was sharper now too, less dismissive, more practical. Doomsday stood between them, breathing hard, chest rising and falling. His spikes were longer, his arms were thicker, his stance looked more stable, more balanced. He had learned. He roared again and rushed them both, not choosing one target, just trying to break the line. Thanos and Darkseid moved at the same time without speaking. Thanos sidestepped and struck Doomsday's knee joint with a heavy kick, aiming to compromise mobility. Darkseid fired Omega beams low, trying to cut off Doomsday's path and force him to turn. Doomsday adjusted mid-stride. He stepped over the beam line, twisted, and drove a shoulder into Thanos, forcing him back. Then he spun and hit Darkseid with the back of his arm. Darkseid slid, boots scraping. Thanos lunged again and landed a clean punch to Doomsday's ribs. Doomsday didn't react much. He turned and grabbed Thanos by the throat. Thanos' hands snapped up immediately, gripping Doomsday's wrist, trying to break the hold. Doomsday lifted him. Thanos' feet left the ground. For a second, Thanos' composure held, but there was a visible tightening at the corners of his eyes. Not panic, just pressure. Darkseid fired Omega beams at Doomsday's arm. Doomsday's skin thickened again, but the beam still forced him to flinch. His grip loosened slightly. Thanos took the opening. He shoved both thumbs into Doomsday's wrist joint and twisted hard. The bones cracked. Doomsday snarled and threw Thanos instead of holding him. Thanos flew across the arena and hit the wall hard enough to crater it. He dropped to one knee, then stood again, breathing steady but heavier than before. Darkseid's eyes glowed brighter. He raised both hands this time and fired Omega beams in a wider pattern, pushing Doomsday back with continuous force. Doomsday dug into the ground with his claws and pushed forward anyway. I rubbed my hands together once, smiling. "Okay," I said, voice carrying. "Now it's a problem." Thanos looked up toward my platform briefly. His eyes narrowed. "You brought this creature here," he said, voice low but clear. "Yeah," I replied casually. "And you brought your big purple attitude, so we're all contributing." Darkseid didn't look at me. He kept his focus on Doomsday. "This is a waste," Darkseid said, voice steady. "Yeah, well," I said, leaning back. "Then stop wasting and start winning." Neither of them responded. Doomsday surged again and broke through the Omega beams with sheer momentum, slamming into Darkseid and driving him backward across the arena floor. Darkseid's boots gouged long lines in the stone, but he stayed upright, hands gripping Doomsday's shoulders. Thanos came in from behind and wrapped his arm around Doomsday's neck, pulling back hard in a choke that would have killed anything with a normal throat. Doomsday's neck thickened immediately. His jaw unhinged slightly, teeth lengthened. He bit down on Thanos' forearm. Thanos' arm tensed, his eyes narrowed sharply, his mouth tightened. He didn't scream. He didn't react dramatically. He just slammed his free fist into Doomsday's skull twice, trying to break the bite. Doomsday held. Darkseid grabbed Doomsday's face with both hands and forced his head back, pulling his jaw away from Thanos' arm. Doomsday's teeth tore through fabric and armor plating. Blood splattered onto the stone. Thanos stepped back, rolling his shoulder. His forearm was bleeding, deep gouges. He glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Doomsday. His expression had shifted now, still calm, but colder. "Enough," Thanos said. He reached to his belt and drew a blade, double-edged, heavy. Doomsday immediately lunged. Thanos moved, blade flashing, slicing across Doomsday's torso. The cut opened flesh, black blood spilled. Doomsday roared and swung. Thanos ducked and drove the blade upward into Doomsday's side. Doomsday staggered, then grabbed the blade with his hand, crushing it partially with brute force. Thanos yanked it free, stepping back. Doomsday's wound started closing almost immediately. Not instantly, but fast enough to be annoying. Darkseid lifted one hand and fired Omega beams again, not to burn Doomsday this time, but to pin him. The beams wrapped around Doomsday's limbs, forcing him to fight against them like chains of energy. Doomsday strained, muscles bulging, spikes pressing outward. Thanos closed in and struck Doomsday's exposed torso again, aiming for the same wound, trying to overwhelm regeneration. Doomsday adapted again. His skin around the repeated cuts hardened into thick plates. The blade's edge sparked and slid instead of biting deep. Thanos' jaw tightened. Darkseid's eyes narrowed further. Doomsday broke one of the Omega beam restraints with a violent flex and slammed his freed fist into Thanos' chest. Thanos flew backward again, landing hard and rolling. He rose quickly, but his breathing was heavier now. Darkseid tightened the remaining Omega beams, forcing Doomsday's arms outward, trying to hold him in place long enough to do real damage. Doomsday roared and pushed anyway. The beams trembled. Darkseid's posture stiffened slightly, as if he had to apply more effort. Not much, but more than he wanted to admit. Thanos stepped back into position beside Darkseid, blade still in hand, eyes locked on Doomsday. They didn't look like allies. They looked like two predators tolerating each other because the prey was worse. Thanos spoke, without raising his voice. "This creature grows stronger with each exchange," he said. "Prolonging this benefits it." Darkseid's reply was short. "Then end it." Thanos glanced sideways at Darkseid. "You have power beyond this," Thanos said. "Use it." Darkseid's eyes flicked briefly, a tiny shift that still read as contempt. "I do not escalate for spectacle," Darkseid said. I snorted from my seat. "Oh, that's rich," I said, shaking my head. "You're literally standing in an arena on your planet with flaming architecture and skull vibes. Don't pretend you're above spectacle." Darkseid finally looked up at me. His gaze felt like pressure. "Be silent," Darkseid said. I smiled wider, unfazed. "No," I said brightly. "I'm the guy with the microphone. I'm legally obligated to be annoying." Thanos didn't look at me. He stayed focused on Doomsday. Doomsday's muscles bulged again. The Omega beams snapped one after another. He tore free. Darkseid's eyes flared as he fired again, but Doomsday was already moving. He slammed into Darkseid with both hands and drove him back, lifting him slightly off the ground with brute force before slamming him down. Darkseid hit the stone hard enough to crack it. Thanos lunged in and drove his blade toward Doomsday's neck. Doomsday turned and caught Thanos' wrist, stopping the blade midair. Thanos tried to twist free. Doomsday squeezed harder. Thanos' forearm muscles tensed. His expression stayed contained, but I could see it in his eyes. He was starting to recognize that raw strength alone wasn't going to keep pace. Darkseid rose behind Doomsday and grabbed him by the back of the head, pulling sharply. Doomsday's neck flexed, then grew thicker. Darkseid fired Omega beams point blank into Doomsday's back. Doomsday roared and shoved forward, still holding Thanos' wrist. Thanos' arm bent at an ugly angle and snapped back as he forced it, refusing to let the joint fail. He pivoted, bringing his other hand up to slam a punch into Doomsday's throat. Doomsday didn't flinch. He headbutted Thanos again. Thanos staggered. Doomsday seized the moment and threw Thanos down to the ground, then stomped. Thanos rolled barely in time. The stomp cratered the stone where his head had been. Darkseid grabbed Doomsday's shoulder and yanked him back, then struck him with a heavy punch to the side of the head. Doomsday turned and swung a backhand that caught Darkseid across the jaw. Darkseid slid. Thanos rose again, stepping back into position, blade still in hand, but now held differently, more cautious. The two of them were being pushed. Not losing, but being forced upward. Forced to spend. Forced to stop treating this like a nuisance. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, eyes wide and bright. My lips parted in a grin that I didn't try to hide. "Okay," I said softly, sounding pleased. "Now we're at the part where you two decide how much you actually care about winning." Doomsday roared again and charged, faster than before, spikes extending further down his arms like armor. Thanos and Darkseid braced together without saying anything. Darkseid raised his hand, eyes glowing brighter than they had yet. Thanos shifted his stance, blade angled low, muscles coiled. Doomsday closed the distance, and the collision shook the entire arena, sending a wave of debris outward and rattling the spectator platform hard enough that my chair scraped back half an inch. I steadied myself with one hand on the armrest, eyes locked on the chaos below, my smile still there, my pulse slightly faster, my shoulders relaxed like I was watching a sport I actually liked. The fight didn't slow. It got louder. It got rougher, and it still wasn't close to finished. Chapter 4. Output, Adaptation, and a Better Show. Doomsday hit them again, and the arena answered with noise and fractures. He was faster than he had been 5 minutes ago. Not just faster in the simple sense, either. His movement had changed. He stopped wasting force. He stopped charging straight through everything like a wild animal. He started adjusting mid-strike, shifting his weight in ways that made his body look less like a blunt instrument and more like something built to kill whatever was in front of it. That was the part that made it fun. Darkseid and Thanos were still standing in the same general space, still not calling each other allies, still not pretending to like this, but they were moving with a rough coordination now. Not teamwork the way heroes did it. More like two serious problems, agreeing that the third problem was temporarily worse. Doomsday slammed into Thanos first. Thanos braced, feet digging into broken stone, shoulders tight. Doomsday's shoulder hit Thanos' chest like a battering ram. Thanos slid back a few meters, then planted and drove a punch into Doomsday's jaw. Doomsday's head turned. He barely reacted. Bone ridges shifted again along his cheek. I could see it clearly now. His body was reinforcing the exact spots that kept getting hit. Not a vague, gets tougher thing. Specific. Thanos tried to hook the next strike around the ridges, to hit softer tissue. Doomsday's forearm rose and blocked. The block was cleaner than before. Doomsday's other hand grabbed Thanos' wrist and yanked, pulling Thanos forward into a knee that hit him square in the abdomen. Thanos bent slightly at the waist, not collapsing, but forced to exhale. Doomsday followed with a short headbutt that snapped Thanos' head back. Thanos staggered one step. Darkseid fired Omega beams immediately, not at Doomsday's torso this time, but at the side of his head and shoulder to force him to turn. The beams hit and dragged across Doomsday's skin. The red energy burned and carved shallowly, then started losing effectiveness as Doomsday's surface thickened again. Darkseid's eyes flared brighter. He didn't speak. He didn't posture. He simply increased output. The Omega beams sharpened, more concentrated, and the drag line turned into a harder strike. Doomsday's body finally reacted with a full recoil, shoulders jerking back, feet digging into the ground. Thanos used the moment. He stepped in close, blade angled up, and drove it into the gap beneath Doomsday's rib plating where the earlier cuts had been. The blade bit, but not as deep as before. Doomsday roared and tried to twist away, muscles clenching around the wound as if his body was trying to clamp the weapon out. Thanos didn't yank. He rotated the blade, trying to widen damage before Doomsday could seal it. Doomsday adapted mid-motion. The tissue around the blade stiffened and pushed outward, forcing the blade's angle off-center. Thanos' eyes narrowed. He looked irritated now, not emotional, just annoyed that a plan wasn't working cleanly. Darkseid's Omega beams shifted again, pinning Doomsday's shoulders rather than burning his back. The beams held him in place for a second longer than they should have. Doomsday's spikes twitched and grew, pressing against the energy like something pushing into a net. I leaned forward on my spectator seat, elbows on my knees, popcorn forgotten in my lap. My eyes felt a little wider than they had been, and I didn't bother hiding it. "Yeah," I said softly, pleased. "That's it, do the thing." Darkseid did the thing. He stepped forward and raised both hands, palms angled slightly down. The Omega beams didn't just shoot as a line anymore. They spread, then folded inward with control, hitting multiple points at once like Darkseid was trying to overwhelm adaptation with coverage. Doomsday's body jerked under the hits. His skin hardened, then hardened again, but the change couldn't keep up with the shift in pattern. He was adapting, but he was still being forced to take damage while his body decided what shape it needed. Thanos backed off half a step, blade still in hand, watching the changes with the same calculating stare he used on everything. He didn't speak, but I could see him mapping openings the way he mapped battlefields. Doomsday finally tore one arm free of the Omega pressure. and swung wildly toward Darkseid. Darkseid didn't dodge. He took the hit to the shoulder and barely moved. His eyes burned brighter, and the Omega beams snapped tighter, forcing Doomsday's arm back down. Thanos lunged in again, not to stab the plated areas, but to slash at joints. He cut across Doomsday's elbow crease and then pivoted, slicing behind the knee. Doomsday's leg buckled for a second. He caught himself with a hand on the ground and shoved upward with enough force to crack the stone again. The arena shook, loose debris rattled. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burned flesh. Doomsday's adaptation sped up again. His elbow crease thickened with layered bone. The back of his knee developed a ridge. His joints were getting less flexible, but harder to damage. He was turning into armor. Darkseid's beams hit his face again, and Doomsday's skull ridges shifted to shield his eyes. His jaw widened, teeth lengthened further. He screamed into the beams, pushing forward anyway. Thanos stepped in to intercept. Doomsday grabbed him by the throat again, faster than last time, and lifted him. Thanos' boots left the ground. His hands locked onto Doomsday's wrist. Darkseid's Omega beam struck Doomsday's forearm and hand. Doomsday's grip loosened for a second. Thanos took that second and drove the hilt of his blade into Doomsday's throat with a sharp upward strike. Doomsday's head snapped back, his grip broke. Thanos dropped to the ground, landing cleanly, stepping back with controlled breathing. He looked at the torn armor on his forearm and the blood running down his wrist. His expression was still calm, but there was a tightness at the jaw now that hadn't been there earlier. Darkseid moved in, grabbed Doomsday by the face with one hand, and forced his head upward. The Omega beams fired point-blank into Doomsday's open mouth. That got a reaction. Doomsday convulsed. The inside of his mouth burned. His roar turned into a broken sound, half pain, half rage. He clawed at Darkseid's wrist again, trying to rip the hand away. Darkseid didn't let go. He increased output again. The red energy flared brighter, and the smell of scorched tissue intensified. Thanos didn't waste the opening. He stepped in and drove his blade into Doomsday's side again, pushing as hard as he could, angling for something important. Doomsday's torso tried to seal around it. Bone plates began shifting again to lock the blade in place. Thanos yanked it free before it could be trapped, then struck again, 2 quick stabs in the same general region. The second stab didn't penetrate as well. Doomsday's adaptation was catching up. Darkseid's approach shifted. He stopped using the Omega beams like a weapon meant to injure and started using them like a tool meant to control. The beams pinned Doomsday's limbs, then jerked him sideways, slamming him into the ground. Then they lifted him slightly and threw him into a wall hard enough to crater it. Doomsday hit the wall and bounced off, landing on one knee. He tried to rise. Darkseid's beams hit him again and dragged him back down. Doomsday's spikes grew longer, then thicker, then started forming into layered ridges that pressed against the energy restraints. His body was trying to build leverage against the Omega effect itself. That was the moment Thanos' composure cracked, just slightly. Not with yelling, not with theatrics, just with a low, controlled statement. "This will not end cleanly," Thanos said evenly. Darkseid didn't look at him. "It will end," Darkseid replied flatly. Doomsday tore free again, ripping one limb out of the Omega control with sheer force. His arms swung toward Darkseid's head. Darkseid took the hit, then grabbed the arm mid-swing and twisted. There was a loud crack. Doomsday's elbow bent wrong. Doomsday snarled and tried to pull back. Darkseid didn't let him. The Omega beams fired again at close range, hitting the broken joint, burning deep enough that the adaptation stalled for a moment. The tissue couldn't decide whether to harden or regenerate fast. Thanos stepped in and cut across Doomsday's hamstring ridge. The blade bit shallowly, still enough to slow him. Doomsday's footing faltered. Darkseid did not hesitate. He raised both hands and fired Omega beams in a concentrated, steady stream directly into Doomsday's chest, then shifted the beams upward into the neck, holding the line there longer than before. Doomsday screamed and pushed forward anyway, but his steps slowed. His skin blackened where the beams hit. Bone ridges tried to form, then burned away before they could stabilize. The adaptation was still happening, but it was losing the race. Thanos watched for half a second, then stepped back. He didn't like being outdone, but he liked losing less. Doomsday lunged again, one last heavy shove forward. Darkseid increased output again, and the beams hit with a hard, unmistakable force that stopped Doomsday mid-stride. Doomsday's body locked, his spikes trembled, his arms shook as he tried to tear free. Darkseid's voice stayed calm. "You are not enough," Darkseid said evenly. Doomsday roared back, raw and furious. Darkseid's eyes flared bright, and the Omega beams intensified once more, focused tight into the centerline of Doomsday's upper torso and skull. Doomsday's roar turned into a broken sound. His knees hit the ground. He tried to rise again. Darkseid did not allow it. The beams held. The damage accumulated. Doomsday's body tried to adapt, tried to rebuild, but it was being burned faster than it could reinforce. Doomsday finally collapsed forward into the fractured stone, still twitching, still trying, but no longer able to push. Darkseid lowered his hands. The arena was quiet, except for the crackle of residual energy and Doomsday's ragged breathing. Thanos stood a few meters away, blade lowered, posture stiff. Darkseid turned his head slightly toward Thanos, not as a gesture of respect, more like acknowledgement that the problem was temporarily solved. Thanos' eyes narrowed. He didn't say, "Thank you." He didn't say anything polite. He simply looked at Darkseid with a controlled, cold stare. Darkseid looked back, expression unchanged. That was enough for me. I stood up from my seat and clapped slowly, grinning. "All right," I said, sounding satisfied. "Cool, Darkseid wins. Everybody go home and pretend this didn't mess with your ego." Thanos' gaze snapped toward me. "You orchestrated this," Thanos said evenly. "Yeah," I replied easily. "And you fell for it. So did he. Welcome to the club." Darkseid's eyes turned toward me. His voice was low and flat. "You have wasted my time." I shrugged. "I've done worse," I said. I didn't give them a chance to continue. I opened a portal, massive, wide enough that it felt like a chunk of the universe got cut out and replaced with a view of another one. It wasn't the little oval portal guns stuff. This was an engineered tier, stabilized with tech and math that my brain handled automatically now. One side, Apocalypse, Blackstone, and Firelight. The other side, deep space in Marvel's universe, stars cold and distant. A bridge between worlds. Permanent. Thanos' posture changed subtly the second he saw it. The smallest lift in his chin. The way his eyes tracked the opening like it was already his. Darkseid's gaze hardened in a different way. Less curious, more possessive. Like the concept of another universe was already a resource to be taken. I smiled and took one step behind both of them while they were focused on the portal. Neither of them looked away from it. I flicked my wrist and deployed two tiny devices, each the size of a fingernail. They moved with silent precision, attaching to the back of Thanos' armor near the collar and then to the edge of Darkseid's shoulder plating. Cameras, microsensors, dimensional telemetry, audio, visual, everything. They clicked into place and went dark. Neither of them noticed. Of course they didn't. They were busy thinking about conquest. I turned away from them and walked back toward my own smaller portal, pulling the portal gun up lazily. Have fun, I said lightly. Try not to trip over your own ambition. Thanos didn't answer. Darkseid didn't answer either. I stepped through and left them with their thoughts. I emerged back in Avengers Tower first, exactly where I'd left my original portal to the watchtower. The air inside the tower still smelled faintly like smoke from earlier, but the city below was calmer now. I walked through the tower corridors without urgency, boots tapping lightly on polished floor, lab coat swaying. Everything felt like it belonged to someone else, and I didn't care. I reached the permanent portal I'd left behind, a stable opening that connected to the Justice League watchtower. I stepped through. The watchtower hit me with noise. Alarms, explosions, metal screaming, voices overlapping on comms. I blinked once and looked out over the main command area. The Justice League was fighting. The Avengers were fighting with them. And at the center of the chaos was Brainiac. Not a vague idea of him, not a reference. The real thing, cold, controlled, mechanical, with a presence that felt like pure calculation and a voice that didn't waste syllables. Drones swarmed the room, silver, angular constructs firing energy bolts that scorched the walls. Consoles sparked. Holograms flickered. A section of the command platform had been torn open, exposing wiring and steel. Superman slammed a drone into a bulkhead, crushing it. Another drone hit him in the back with a green pulse, and he jerked slightly, annoyed more than hurt. Batman moved along the edge, grapnel line, snapping out to pull a drone into a Batarang cluster. His jaw was tight, eyes focused, not speaking unless needed. Wonder Woman blocked a burst of fire with her bracers and cut through two drones in a smooth motion, her expression set in concentration. Flash zipped across the room, grabbing fallen tech pieces before they hit civilians. There were a few watchtower staff scrambling behind a damaged console. His face was tense, but he still moved with that restless speed. Green Lantern's construct shield flared as it absorbed a barrage. On the Avengers side, Tony was in full armor, repulsors firing, shouting into comms. "Okay, I'm just gonna say it," Tony said sharply. "This guy is way more into the whole cold robot vibe than I am, and I'm offended." Steve was in the thick of it, shield up, taking cover fire and directing movements with short commands. "Clint, high left," Steve called. "Nat with me." Natasha moved low behind cover, firing controlled shots into drone joints. Clint fired arrows that crackled with energy, disabling clusters at once. Thor threw Mjolnir, and the hammer smashed through a line of drones before returning to his hand. Lightning arced, briefly lighting the room bright. Hulk was there too, roaring, grabbing two drones and smashing them together like they were made of cardboard. He looked irritated more than anything, like the whole situation had interrupted something he wanted. Brainiac stood near the central console, calm in the middle of it all, tendrils of tech extending from him into watchtower systems. His voice cut through the noise. "Resistance is inefficient," Brainiac said evenly. "This knowledge will be collected." Tony fired a repulsor, blast at him. A shield snapped up instantly, deflecting it. Brainiac didn't even move his head. I walked in like I'd just arrived at a sports bar. I found a chair that was somehow still intact near the back edge of the command area and dragged it a few feet to a spot with a clean view. The chair legs screeched against the floor for half a second. No one noticed me at first. They were busy not dying. I sat down, crossed my legs, and pulled out popcorn from my coat like it was the most normal thing in the universe. I ate one piece and watched. A drone flew toward me. It fired. The bolt hit an invisible barrier about 2 feet in front of my face and dissipated. I chewed calmly. Tony finally saw me. His helmet turned sharply, faceplate tracking. "Are you kidding me?" Tony snapped. "You're here." I lifted the popcorn bucket, slightly in greeting. Hey, I said casually in Rick's voice. Nice satellite. Love the whole everything is expensive vibe. Steve saw me too, eyes narrowing briefly. Rick, Steve called, voice strained as he blocked another drone blast. Are you going to help? I leaned back in the chair, relaxed, and tossed popcorn into my mouth. Nah, I replied flatly. You guys clearly have this. You've got, what, 2 teams worth of people who can punch through walls. I'm doing morale. Batman's head turned toward me from the shadows, eyes hard. You brought them here, Batman said, voice sharp. Technically, I said, chewing, I brought the Avengers to your world, and now you've got a robot problem. That's not on me. That's on you for having a robot problem. Superman flew past, slamming into Brainiac's shield again, pushing hard. The shield held. Superman grunted, landing and looking briefly irritated. Brainiac's drones shifted tactics, forming a tighter formation, focusing fire on the heaviest hitters to pin them down while smaller units flanked. Green Lantern shouted over comms, strained. He's adapting his drone patterns, Lantern said, jaw tight. He's reading our movements. Yeah, Tony replied, firing again. He's a creep with Wi-Fi. Wonder Woman moved toward Brainiac directly, sword ready. 2 drones cut in front of her, and she destroyed them, but 3 more took their place instantly. Flash zipped past her. I can try to unplug him, Flash said quickly, voice tense. Batman snapped, don't touch anything until. Flash was already moving. He ran along the console edge, hands blurring as he tried to yank a tendril line free. Brainiac's head turned toward him for the first time. A drone fired a concentrated pulse. Flash barely dodged, but the pulse clipped his shoulder and sent him tumbling across the floor, skidding to a stop near a damaged console. He sat up fast, breathing hard. I'm okay, Flash said quickly, sounding annoyed. I'm okay. I ate another piece of popcorn and watched Flash with mild approval. Yeah, I said lightly. Don't just grab alien cords, man. That's how you get space tetanus. Flash looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. Why are you here? Flash asked, sounding frustrated. I was in the neighborhood, I replied casually. Also, your robot friend here is doing a great job. Love the commitment. Brainiac's voice stayed calm. Your presence is anomalous, Brainiac said evenly, his eyes briefly flicking toward me. You will be catalogued. I stared back at him, still chewing, and shrugged. Get in line, I said. A heavy blast hit the far wall. The watchtower shook. Superman grabbed a falling beam before it hit a staff member, then tossed it aside. Thor stepped in, catching another drone with one hand and crushing it. Steve shouted again, trying to keep everyone organized. Keep pressure on him, Steve called. Don't let him isolate anyone. Batman moved toward the central platform, throwing a device that emitted a burst of electromagnetic noise. Several drones faltered and dropped. Brainiac adjusted immediately. More drones poured in from a side corridor, replacing the ones that fell. Tony's voice sharpened. Okay, Tony said, sounding irritated. He's got infinite drones. That's not great. Hulk grabbed a drone and hurled it into a cluster, smashing several at once. Still more came. Natasha slid behind cover near Batman, firing into drone joints with precise shots. Any plan, Batman? Natasha asked sharply. Batman's voice stayed controlled. Working, Batman replied. Superman lifted off again, eyes narrowing, and slammed into Brainiac's shield with more force. Thor followed, hammer crackling, striking the shield. It still held, but the surface rippled now. Brainiac's gaze stayed steady. He extended more tendrils into the watchtower systems. Alarms changed tone. The floor panels near the center glowed briefly, as if charging. Green Lantern's construct shield flared, absorbing a new kind of pulse. It's not just drones, Lantern said tensely. He's using the watchtower against us. I leaned back farther in the chair, shoulders relaxed, popcorn in hand, and watched the whole mess with calm interest. My eyes flicked over the room, tracking who was where, who was getting tired, how Brainiac was splitting attention, how long it would take before someone did something reckless. I didn't move. I didn't help. Not yet. The fight kept going. Brainiac's drones tightened their circle. Superman and Thor pushed harder. Steve kept calling orders. Batman kept working his silent plan. And I kept eating popcorn, watching like I'd paid for a seat. Chapter 5. Weapon Systems and Bad Priorities. Brainiac's drones stopped acting like a swarm and started acting like a plan. It happened in a way most people would miss if they were busy dodging energy bolts and shouting at each other. The drones that had been pressing Superman and Thor pulled back half a step. The ones flanking Natasha and Clint tightened formation. 2 units that had been hovering near the ceiling dropped lower, angling toward the main console bank instead of the obvious targets. Brainiac himself didn't move much. He never did. He stood near the watchtower's central platform with those tendrils threaded into the station like he'd been born there. His posture stayed calm, almost relaxed, while everyone else was sweating and scrambling. I sat in my chair, legs crossed, popcorn in hand, watching the shift like it was a replay I'd already seen. "Okay," I said quietly, sounding entertained. "He's going for the buttons." Tony Stark's helmet turned toward a nearby holographic screen that was glitching under Brainiac's influence. He fired at a drone, then snapped his head up again when the screen flashed red. "Ah, guys," Tony said sharply. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Batman was already moving. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't need clarification. His body language shifted into that more urgent version of control he tried to hide from everyone else. "What is it?" Steve asked, voice firm as he blocked a burst and shoved a drone away with his shield. Tony's repulsors flared as he forced a drone back from the console bank. "It's the Watchtower's weapons systems," Tony replied, voice tense. "Big ones. The kind of ones you don't point at your own station unless you're doing insurance fraud." Green Lantern's construct shield flickered as he absorbed another concentrated burst. "He's overriding the network," Lantern said, jaw tight. "He's getting into everything." Superman slammed 2 drones together and looked toward the central platform, eyes narrowing. "Batman," Superman called, voice clipped. "What can he access?" Batman didn't look up from his movement. He threw something small and flat that stuck to a drone mid-flight, detonating with a sharp pulse that made 3 units drop. "Everything if we let him," Batman replied evenly. Wonder Woman cut through a drone that tried to flank her, then shifted her stance to guard the approach to the central platform. "Then we do not let him," she said, voice steady. Thor landed hard, lightning crackling faintly around his shoulders. He looked at the tendrils connected to the station and frowned, like the entire concept offended him. "This machine creature reaches into your fortress like a thief," Thor said, voice rough. "We should tear him free." "Yeah, okay, great," Tony said quickly. "Go rip out the alien USB cables. Love that plan. Just don't rip out anything that explodes." I tossed a piece of popcorn into my mouth and chewed slowly. My eyes tracked the holographic readouts near the ceiling, system alerts, command lockouts, power rerouting. Brainiac was shifting the Watchtower's internal power flow toward weapon arrays. He wasn't just trying to shoot them. He was trying to take control of the station as a weapon. Steve's voice cut through the noise again, calm but hard. "We split," Steve said. "One group keeps pressure on Brainiac. The rest stops him from controlling the station." Batman snapped his gaze toward Steve for half a second. Not approval, not disapproval, assessment. "We don't have time for debate," Batman said. "Lantern, flash with me. Stark, get eyes on the weapon control nodes. Superman, keep him off the main console." Tony fired at a drone, then nodded sharply. Great, Tony said. I'll just hack the alien hacker inside your space laser. Cool, totally normal Tuesday. Flash zipped to Batman's side, breathing fast, eyes wide. Okay, Flash said quickly. What do you need? Batman's jaw tightened. Speed, Batman replied simply. And don't touch anything you don't understand. Flash blinked. That's like 90% of my day, Flash said, sounding stressed. Green Lantern's ring flared as he formed a construct barrier that shoved drones back. Let's go, Lantern said, pushing forward, before this thing turns the watchtower into a gun. Natasha glanced at Steve, then at the shifting drones. I'll cover the tech team, Natasha said, voice low, already moving. Clint fired an arrow that burst into an EMP effect, taking out a cluster of drones near the ceiling. I'm with her, Clint said. Hulk roared and charged, swatting drones out of the air like they were insects. He wasn't subtle. He didn't need to be. Steve pointed. Hulk, keep the drones off them, Steve ordered. Hulk didn't respond verbally. He just did it. I watched them split into motion and felt a small, honest spark of amusement. Not admiration, not respect, just entertainment. Watching competent people do competent things was always better than listening to them talk about it. Brainiac's voice carried over the chaos, flat and calm. The station's primary systems are inefficiently defended, Brainiac said evenly. This will be corrected. Tony's helmet snapped toward him. Oh, shut up, Tony said irritably. Nobody asked you for performance feedback. Superman lifted off again and slammed into Brainiac's shield with a hard, direct strike. The shield rippled outward, holding but showing strain. Thor followed, Mjolnir smashing into the shield surface, electricity crackling. Wonder Woman pressed in with a clean, powerful strike, sword edge scraping along the energy barrier, trying to destabilize it. Brainiac didn't flinch. His tendrils remained connected. If anything, more tendrils extended. The watchtower's lighting flickered, then stabilized in a colder tone. A low hum built underfoot. The station was charging something. Batman, Flash, and Green Lantern moved toward an access corridor on the left side of the command deck. Tony peeled off toward a secondary console cluster, hands moving fast as he overrode damaged panels with his own interface. Natasha and Clint moved with them, providing cover fire, while Steve stayed near the center, keeping drones off Superman's blind side. I stayed in my chair and kept eating popcorn. A drone drifted toward me again and fired. The bolt splashed harmlessly against my personal field. Tony noticed and stared for half a second while his hands kept moving. You're really just, Tony started. I lifted the popcorn bucket slightly. Don't let me stop you from saving the day, I said casually. Steve shot me a look that was half frustration and half focus. He didn't waste time arguing. He was too busy being Captain America about it. Batman disappeared into the corridor, moving fast. Flash and Lantern followed. The corridor lights blinked and then went red. Batman's voice came through comms, tight and controlled. Security systems are shifting, Batman said. He's locking down access. Lantern grunted. I can force an opening, Lantern said. Don't, Batman replied immediately. If he wants us funneled, it's a trap. Flash's voice came through, quick and tense. So what do we do? Flash asked. Batman's answer was immediate. We bypass, Batman said. Tony cursed softly over comms. He's in the core routing, Tony said. He's rewriting the station's control hierarchy. Superman struck Brainiac's shield again, harder, and the shield finally cracked for a second, just a visible fracture line. Wonder Woman moved instantly, trying to exploit it. Brainiac's shield resealed. His drones tightened around them again, and a new type of drone moved in, heavier plating, slower but with more concentrated firepower. They aimed not at the heroes, but at the consoles and structural points. He's trying to disable our control, Batman said over comms. He wants the station blind. Thor grabbed one heavy drone midair and crushed it, then threw the wreckage into another. Lightning arced across the room briefly, knocking several drones off course. Superman grabbed a fallen beam again and tossed it aside. His jaw was set, eyes focused on Brainiac. Steve pivoted, shield raised. "Keep him away from the systems," Steve called. "Tony, how close?" Tony's voice sounded strained but sharp. "Depends," Tony said. "How do you feel about me rewriting alien code while your satellite tries to aim its own guns at its own head?" Steve didn't answer that. He didn't have the time. The watchtower hum deepened. A large holographic display over the central platform flickered into a new interface: weapon array status, targeting alignment, power charge levels climbing. Green Lantern's voice came through again, louder now. "Batman," Lantern said, "I'm seeing external array ports opening. He's actually—" A new vibration hit the station, a distant mechanical shift, like something huge turning. My eyebrows lifted slightly, my attention sharpened. "Yep," I said quietly. "He's spinning the big stuff." Superman heard the shift too. He looked up toward the ceiling display and then back at Brainiac, expression tightening. "Batman," Superman said, voice clipped. "How long until he can fire?" Batman's reply came fast. "Minutes," Batman said. Tony made a frustrated sound. "Okay," Tony said. "That is not enough minutes." A heavy drone fired at Tony's console cluster. Clint shot it mid-flight with an explosive arrow, knocking it off trajectory, but the blast still rocked the platform. Tony's interface flickered. Tony's voice rose in irritation. "Hey," Tony snapped. "Careful, I'm doing delicate crimes here." Natasha grabbed Tony's shoulder briefly, steadying him as another tremor ran through the floor. "Less talking," Natasha said sharply. "More hacking." Tony's helmet turned slightly toward her. "Yes, ma'am," Tony replied, sounding annoyed but compliant. Steve moved toward the corridor entrance, intercepting drones that tried to slip past Wonder Woman's guard. "Diana," Steve called, "can you hold the center?" Wonder Woman nodded once, focused, and stepped into a more defensive stance, braces up, sword angled low, ready to intercept anything that got through. On the far side, Brainiac's tendrils thickened, more connections forming. He was spreading deeper into the watchtower, not just weapons, life support, communications, navigation. He was taking the place apart and making it his. Green Lantern's voice sharpened again. "Found the access panel," Lantern said. "I can rip it open." Batman answered immediately. "No brute force," Batman said. Lantern sounded irritated. "That's literally my whole job," Lantern replied. Batman stayed controlled. "Brute force triggers failsafes," Batman said. "He wants failsafes. If the station locks weapons into autonomous mode, we lose." Flash's breathing came through comms, fast and nervous. "I can run the whole station and find the node," Flash said quickly. "Just point me." Batman's answer came without hesitation. "You'll get caught in a loop," Batman said. "He's using predictive response. You're fast, not invisible." Flash made a strained sound. "Okay," Flash said, frustrated. "So what do I do?" Batman paused for half a second, then gave him something specific. "Carry," Batman said. Flash blinked audibly through his voice. "Carry what?" Flash asked. Batman replied, precise. "Me," Batman said. There was a second of silence. Then Flash spoke again, sounding resigned. "Okay," Flash said. A moment later, Batman's comm feed shifted as the sound of rushing air flooded it. Flash was moving him at speed through the maintenance network. I watched the main fight continue while Batman executed his plan in the background. It was almost relaxing. Everybody had a role. Everybody was predictable. Brainiac's drones surged again. They were focusing on Superman now, trying to occupy him long enough for Brainiac to finish weapon override. Superman took the hits. He didn't stop. He pushed forward again. Thor joined him, hammer swinging, lightning arcing. Wonder Woman advanced in tandem, striking drones that tried to flank them. Hulk leapt, smashing down on a cluster, then grabbed two more and slammed them into the floor. Steve fought like a conductor with a shield, moving, positioning, keeping lines from breaking. Tony kept working the console, trying to regain command access. The Watchtower's hum became a steady, heavy tone now. On the overhead display, a charge meter climbed past a threshold. Green Lantern's voice came through tight. "Charge is nearing completion," Lantern said. Tony responded instantly. "Yeah," Tony said. "I can see that giant red bar, thanks." Brainiac's voice carried again, calm and certain. "Your station will serve its purpose," Brainiac said evenly. "This knowledge will be preserved." Tony fired another repulsor at Brainiac's shield out of spite. It didn't do anything. Tony's shoulders rose slightly with irritation. "I hate him," Tony muttered. I grinned and ate another piece of popcorn. "Join the club," I said casually. Natasha glanced back at me briefly, eyes narrowed, then returned to firing. She didn't have the luxury of arguing with my existence. She was busy not dying. Clint fired another arrow that burst into a net of crackling energy, disabling a handful of drones near the ceiling. His expression stayed focused, jaw tight. Over comms, Batman's voice returned, slightly distorted by speed and movement. "We're close to the primary routing node," Batman said. "Stark, I need a window, 30 seconds. Tony's hands moved faster. "You'll get 10, Tony said sharply. "Take it or leave it." Batman didn't respond emotionally. "10 is enough," Batman replied. Flash's voice cut in, strained with effort. "Everything looks the same," Flash said quickly. "Everything is corridors." Batman gave him a short instruction. "Left," Batman said. "Now." Flash complied instantly. The station shook again, heavier. On the overhead display, weapon array doors finished opening. Somewhere outside, massive panels separated. The Watchtower's main weapons were aligning. Superman looked up and then down at Brainiac, jaw tightening. He spoke once, voice firm. "Batman," Superman said, "we're running out of time." Batman's reply was controlled. "Then buy it," Batman said. Superman nodded, then flew directly into Brainiac's shield again, but this time he didn't strike and pull away. He held pressure, pushing, forcing the shield to strain. Thor joined, hammer braced, adding force. Wonder Woman stepped in, bracing behind them, adding her own strength. The shield rippled. It held, but it was visibly under stress. Brainiac finally reacted, with more than passive defense. A pulse rippled outward from his body. The pulse hit Superman first, then Thor, then Wonder Woman. It wasn't a simple blast. It was a system shock, like he was trying to disrupt biological function with a targeted signal. Superman's eyes narrowed. He held position. Thor grunted, electricity crackling around him like his body rejected the intrusion. Wonder Woman's stance shifted but held. Steve took the edge of the pulse and stumbled one step, then steadied himself with the shield. Tony's console flickered. Tony swore. "Okay," Tony said sharply. "He's pushing back into the local network. I'm losing." Natasha grabbed a cable and yanked it free, rerouting Tony's interface power supply. "Keep going," Natasha said flatly. Tony's breathing sounded tighter. "Yeah," Tony said. "Great, thanks, love field repairs." Batman's voice came through again. "Window," Batman said. "Now." Tony's hands flew. "Okay," Tony said quickly. I can drop his access for 10 seconds. 10, not 11, don't ask. Batman responded immediately. Do it, Batman said. Tony hit a sequence. A burst of interference surged through the watchtower systems. The overhead display flickered. The weapon alignment paused for a fraction of a second. Brainiac's tendrils twitched, and his shield wavered. Batman's voice came through again, faster now. Flash, Batman said. Stop here. Flash's breathing spiked. Here, Flash said. This is. Here, Batman repeated firmly. There was the sound of movement, then a sharp metallic click. Batman had reached the node. I leaned forward a little, interest sharpening. Okay, I said quietly. Let's see if you guys can unplug the brain. Brainiac's voice cut in again, still calm, but there was a slight shift in cadence. External interference detected, Brainiac said evenly. Adjusting. The overhead display resumed movement. Charge levels climbed again. Targeting alignment started to shift, this time toward something not outside. Toward the watchtower itself. Tony's voice rose in panic and irritation. He's going to fire inside the station, Tony said sharply. He's going to cook us from the inside. That's insane. That's like setting your house on fire to kill a spider. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I said, that's very Brainiac. Steve's voice snapped, controlled but urgent. Batman, Steve said, can you stop it? Batman didn't waste breath. Working, Batman replied. Superman pushed harder, Thor pushed harder, Wonder Woman held the line. Drones kept firing, Hulk kept smashing, Clint and Natasha kept covering Tony. Brainiac's tendrils tightened. The station's hum deepened. The weapon array charge hit another threshold. My popcorn bucket was half empty now. I ate another piece slowly, eyes fixed on the overhead display and the central platform, watching the timing. Batman's voice came through again, quieter but steady. I'm in, Batman said. Then a sharp mechanical sound echoed through the watchtower. Not an explosion, not a blast. A hard disconnect. Brainiac's tendrils shuddered. His shield flickered. For the first time since this started, Brainiac turned his head slightly toward the corridor. His drones shifted, a portion peeling away from the main fight to intercept Batman's position. Superman saw the shield flicker and reacted instantly, trying to break through while it was unstable. Thor swung Mjolnir into the weakening barrier. Wonder Woman stepped in with a clean, precise strike. The shield held, barely. Brainiac's drones surged toward Batman's corridor. Batman's voice came through again, clipped. Flash, Batman said, move. Flash replied instantly. Yep, Flash said, strained. The comm feed rushed again as Flash pulled Batman out at speed. The overhead display still showed charge near completion. Brainiac was still connected, though weakened. He was still trying to seize the weapons. He was still dangerous. I sat back in my chair, chewing slowly, feeling a small, honest excitement in my chest that I didn't bother to hide. All right, I said casually, voice carrying just enough that a few heads flicked my way. This is finally a good episode. Chapter 6, 10 seconds, 0 patience. The watchtower shook again, and this time it wasn't just the floor panels rattling. It was a deeper vibration that ran through the structure, the kind that made loose tools skitter and made the lights dim for half a beat before emergency power corrected. On the overhead display, the weapon charge sat high enough that even Steve's eyes kept flicking up to it between blocks. The targeting reticle wasn't pointed into open space anymore. Brainiac had rotated it inward, lining it up through the watchtower's own interior geometry like he was trying to prove a point. Tony's voice stayed sharp over comms. He's aiming at the station, Tony said tensely. That's not a threat, that's a tantrum. I leaned back in my chair and kept eating popcorn. My field shimmered once as a stray bolt hit it and fizzled out. Batman's voice came through the channel, clipped. "Stark," Batman said. "I need another flicker." Tony's hands moved over his improvised interface, fingers fast even through the gloves. "I can maybe give you one more," Tony replied, sounding strained. "But he's learning. If I hit him the same way twice, he's going to slap me with my own keyboard." Superman hovered near Brainiac's shield, shoulders squared, jaw set, taking drone fire like it was rain. Thor stood beside him, hammer in hand, electricity crawling along the head of Mjolnir in short bursts. Wonder Woman held the line with them, braces raised, sword angled down until she needed it. Steve positioned himself slightly back, calling movements, shield catching fire. "Nat, keep Tony clear," Steve ordered. "Clint, ceiling line. Lantern, cover the corridor." Green Lantern's construct flared above Batman's corridor entrance, a hard green barricade that caught a concentrated volley and held. Lantern gritted his teeth. "I can hold it," Lantern said, voice strained. "For now." Flash zipped back into view, stopping near Batman for half a second, breathing fast. Batman's posture was rigid. He didn't look injured, but he looked irritated, which for him was basically a flare gun. "Flash," Batman said, "you're going in again." Flash blinked. Flash started, then swallowed. Okay, what do you need?" Batman held up a compact device. It looked like one of his, not Watchtower tech, something he'd planned for. "This goes into Brainiac's core interface," Batman said evenly. "It will force a disconnect long enough for Superman to breach the shield." Flash's eyes widened. "His core interface is under the shield," Flash said quickly. "And the shield is, the shield." Batman didn't blink. "That's why we need Stark's flicker," Batman said. Tony's voice cut in, irritated. "Hey," Tony said, "my flicker has a name. It's called I'm doing my best with alien malware on a space laser." Batman ignored the comment. "10 seconds," Batman said. Tony exhaled hard. "Fine," Tony said. "I can do 10. After that, if your plan involves me dying, I'd like it in writing." I tossed popcorn into my mouth and chewed, watching Brainiac's drones reposition again. They were clustering near the ceiling, not random. They were forming arcs along the lighting rails, aligning with structural nodes. My eyebrows lifted slightly. "Yeah," I said, voice casual, loud enough to carry. "He's about to use the station's turrets, also gravity, just so you guys know." Tony's helmet turned toward me sharply. "Can you not do the spoilers from the couch thing?" Tony snapped. I shrugged. "It's not spoilers," I said calmly. "It's pattern recognition. He's literally wiring himself into the watchtower. That's like letting a guy into your house and then being shocked he found your fridge." Batman's eyes flicked toward the overhead display. He'd already seen the same signs. He just didn't say it out loud. Brainiac's voice cut through the noise again, calm and flat. "Your coordination is predictable," Brainiac said evenly. "Your resistance will be archived." Thor snarled, not with rage, more with annoyance. "You speak too much for a machine," Thor said roughly. Brainiac didn't respond emotionally. A new tone sounded through the watchtower, a mechanical arming sequence. Panels along the walls slid open in sections, revealing internal defense turrets that rotated into place. Natasha's eyes flicked up. "Turrets," Natasha said sharply. Clint cursed under his breath. "Yeah," Clint said, "that's new." The turrets fired. Not at Brainiac's drones, at everyone. Green pulses stitched across the room. Superman shifted instantly, moving to intercept shots aimed at the watchtower staff. Wonder Woman raised her shield and braces, deflecting 2 pulses that would have hit Steve. Steve ducked and rolled, shield angled to cover Natasha as she dragged Tony behind a damaged console. Hulk took a turret, burst to the chest and roared. then grabbed the turret mount and ripped it out of the wall, tearing wiring with it. Another turret opened behind him and fired. Hulk turned and smashed that one too. Tony's voice rose in irritation as he wrestled with his interface. "He's controlling internal defense," Tony said. "Because of course he is. Because why fight us when he can just turn the building into a gun?" Green Lantern's construct shield expanded, catching a turret volley that would have cut across Flash's path. Lantern's voice tightened. "Batman," Lantern said, "I'm getting drainage. He's siphoning power from the station into his control loop." Batman's reply was immediate. "Hold," Batman said. Lantern sounded annoyed. "That's not helpful," Lantern replied, but he held anyway. Then the gravity changed. It didn't flip instantly. It ramped. A subtle shift at first. Everyone's footing felt heavier, the air pressed down, knees flexed involuntarily. Steve's boots slid a fraction as he adjusted. "Gravity," Steve said, voice controlled. Superman's eyes narrowed. He hovered higher to reduce friction. Thor's stance widened. Wonder Woman dropped her center of gravity, bracing. Flash stumbled, caught off guard, then regained balance with a quick, frantic step. "Oh, come on," Flash said breathlessly. Brainiac's drones used the moment. They tightened their circle, firing in coordinated bursts, trying to pin the strongest fighters while the station itself did the rest. Tony grunted behind cover. "I'm going to kill him," Tony muttered. "I'm going to kill him, and then I'm going to sue him." Natasha shot 2 drones out of the air with clean, controlled fire. "Less talking," Natasha said sharply. "More dying later." Tony shut up and kept working. Batman's voice came through again, steady. "Stark," Batman said. "On my mark." Tony breathed in, then out. "Give me the mark," Tony said tightly. Batman didn't rush it. He waited as Flash moved into position, crouched low, device in hand, eyes fixed on Brainiac's shield. Flash's face was tense, lips parted, breathing fast. "I hate this," Flash said quickly. Batman's voice stayed level. "Focus," Batman said. "You go in, place it, get out. No improvisation." Flash blinked. "That's my whole thing," Flash said. Batman's answer was immediate. "Not today," Batman said. The gravity increased again, and the floor creaked. A few loose pieces of debris lifted slightly as internal stabilizers compensated. The watchtower didn't like being manipulated from the inside. Superman glanced toward the overhead display again. The weapon charge was still climbing. The targeting reticle stayed inside the station. Steve's voice cut through comms, short and sharp. "We need that disconnect now," Steve said. Batman replied. "Now," Batman said. Tony moved. The interference pulse surged through the system like a jolt. Lights flickered. The turrets paused mid-rotation. The gravity field stuttered, just a hiccup, and the overhead weapon alignment froze for a fraction of a second. Brainiac's tendrils twitched. His shield flickered. "Go," Batman said. Flash moved. He didn't run like a normal person. He blurred forward, low to the ground, weaving through drones, slipping under a turret mount as it reset. His hands stayed steady, device clutched tight. Superman and Thor slammed into the shield at the exact moment it wavered, driving pressure forward. Wonder Woman stepped in behind them, adding force. The shield rippled wide. Flash slipped through the gap, like a needle through fabric. He reached Brainiac's core interface point, where the tendrils met the central platform, and jammed Batman's device into the connection. A sharp, bright pulse flashed. Brainiac's head snapped slightly toward Flash, expression still controlled, but with a new focus. Flash didn't wait. He zipped back out the way he came, barely clearing the flickering shield before it resealed. He skidded near Batman, panting. "I did it," Flash said quickly. I did it, I did it, I did it. Batman didn't praise him. He just nodded once. Good, Batman said. Brainiac's tendrils jerked hard. The device did what it was built to do. The connection didn't vanish, but it staggered. The shield's stability dropped. Superman saw it immediately. He pushed. Hard. The shield fractured visibly, a crack line spreading across its surface. Thor drove Mjolnir into the fracture point, lightning bursting outward. Wonder Woman struck the crack with a clean, precise hit of her blades flat, not trying to cut energy, trying to destabilize the field. The shield collapsed. Brainiac took a step back for the first time. Not in fear, in recalculation. Drones surged to cover him, but Hulk leapt and landed in the middle of them, smashing down with both fists. Clint fired another EMP arrow that stunned a cluster. Natasha slid forward and fired into the tendril joints, forcing them to retract. Tony stepped out from behind cover and fired directly at Brainiac's exposed chassis. Hi, Tony said sharply. Meet consequences. The repulsor blast hit Brainiac squarely. Brainiac's body absorbed it with a shimmer of internal shielding, but he moved again, adjusting. Batman's voice came through, controlled. Stark, Batman said. Weapons system, now. Tony's eyes flicked to the overhead display. His hands flew. I'm trying, Tony said tightly. He's still got hooks in the routing. Green Lantern expanded his construct shield again, pushing back turret fire as the system restarted. The turrets weren't fully stopped, but they were inconsistent now, stuttering as Brainiac's control wavered. Superman grabbed Brainiac by the shoulder and drove him away from the central console bank, slamming him into a wall panel. The panel buckled. Brainiac's drones tried to swarm Superman, but Thor's lightning burst forced them back. Wonder Woman grabbed one drone and threw it into a turret mount, damaging it enough that it sparked and went dead. Steve moved in, shield raised, aiming not at Brainiac, but at the tendrils still connected to the station. Cut him off, Steve ordered. Natasha nodded and shifted fire to the tendril connection points. Clint's arrows followed, detonating small charges that shredded the thinner cables. Brainiac's voice stayed calm. Resistance remains inefficient, Brainiac said evenly. Tony shot him again. Shut up, Tony said. Then Brainiac shifted tactics again. Internal defense stopped being his only tool. The Watchtower's corridor doors slammed shut in sequence, sealing off sections. Airlocks engaged. Emergency bulkheads dropped. The station tried to isolate the heroes into compartments. A console near the back sparked, and a holographic map displayed new red zones. Batman's eyes narrowed. He's trying to separate us, Batman said. Steve immediately moved closer to Natasha and Clint. Stay together, Steve said firmly. Green Lantern's voice tightened. He's cutting off corridor access, Lantern said. He's segmenting the station. Flash looked around, stressed. So we're trapped? Flash asked quickly. Batman's answer was short. No, Batman said. We move faster than his locks. Flash nodded, rapidly, ready. Brainiac's drones surged again, but they weren't the main problem now. The station itself was actively hostile. Floor panels shifted. Gravity pulsed unevenly, making movement unpredictable. Turrets opened in new patterns, firing to herd rather than kill. Tony's interface beeped sharply. I've got partial control back, Tony said. Partial, like 10%. It's not enough to shut down the weapons, but I can delay the firing cycle. Batman's reply was immediate. Do it, Batman said. Tony's hands moved. The overhead weapon charge stalled. It didn't drop, but it stopped climbing. Superman glanced up again, then back to Brainiac, jaw tight. Good, Superman said firmly. Brainiac's tendrils lashed, trying to reconnect to the central routing. Batman tossed another device, and Flash moved it into place at speed, jamming the path and forcing a disconnect. Diana stepped in and severed another cable with a quick strike. Thor grabbed a thicker tendril and tore it free by force, electricity crackling along it as it detached. Brainiac's chassis sparked briefly. His drones moved to defend him, but Hulk waded through them, smashing and roaring, making space. Steve stepped in close, shield up, voice controlled. "Batman," Steve said, "how do we end this?" Batman's eyes stayed on Brainiac. "Remove him from the system," Batman replied evenly. "Then contain him." Tony made a sharp sound. "Containment," Tony said. "Sure, on a space station, with a guy who can hack a space station." Batman's reply was immediate. "We have options," Batman said. Flash raised his hand quickly. "Do I get to vote on those options?" Flash asked. Batman ignored the tone. "You run a containment field emitter to the central platform," Batman said. "Lantern, reinforce it. Stark, power it." Tony snorted. "Of course I'm powering it," Tony said. Green Lantern nodded, jaw tight. "I can do that," Lantern said. Flash was already moving. He grabbed the emitter. Batman handed it off without looking and zipped toward the platform, weaving through drones and turret fire. Superman grabbed Brainiac again and slammed him down onto the platform hard enough to dent it. Brainiac's body hit with a heavy thud and slid slightly. He didn't show pain. He just kept trying to connect, tendrils twitching, reaching. Wonder Woman stepped forward and planted her boot on one of the tendrils, pinning it. "Enough," she said calmly. Brainiac's voice stayed even. "Your defiance is noted," Brainiac said. Natasha shot another tendril joint. Clint followed with a precise arrow that pinned a drone to a wall. Flash arrived at the platform and slapped the emitter into place. Green Lantern's constructs wrapped around it, stabilizing it. Tony routed power through his interface, face tense. A field snapped on, visible as a faint distortion bubble around Brainiac's body and the platform. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to interrupt his connection attempts. Brainiac's tendrils hit the field and recoiled. The Watchtower's turret stuttered again, then slowed. Gravity stabilized. The weapon charge on the overhead display dropped slightly as control returned to baseline. The drone swarm started to lose cohesion, not because the drones shut off, but because Brainiac's coordination broke. They still attacked, but more like a group of separate threats instead of a single machine mind. Superman stepped back slightly, still watching Brainiac closely. Batman's voice stayed controlled. "Containment holds," Batman said. Tony exhaled hard, shoulders dropping slightly. "Great," Tony said. "We did it. We did the thing." Steve didn't relax fully, but his posture eased a fraction. "Keep eyes on the drones," Steve said. "Finish it clean." Thor raised Mjolnir, electricity crackling. "These machines fall easily without their master," Thor said. Hulk roared and smashed another drone into scrap. One by one, the remaining drones were destroyed or disabled. Green Lantern contained clusters. Wonder Woman cut through stragglers. Natasha and Clint cleaned up with precision shots. Steve moved through the chaos, making sure no one got caught by a stray turret discharge. Finally, the room quieted to alarms fading, and the low hum returning to something normal. The watchtower still looked wrecked, but it was no longer actively trying to kill everyone in it. Brainiac remained contained on the platform, field shimmering faintly around him. Batman stared at him, expression hard, calculating what came next. Superman stood nearby, posture tense, eyes steady. Tony's helmet retracted, showing a sweaty, irritated face. Steve leaned on his shield briefly, breathing controlled. Flash leaned forward with hands on his knees, panting. "I'm alive," Flash said quickly, sounding relieved. "I'm alive, that's good." Green Lantern floated down, construct fading. "Can we never do that again?" Lantern asked, voice tired. Natasha holstered her weapon and glanced around at the damage. Clint rubbed the back of his neck. That was a lot, Clint said quietly. I didn't clap, I didn't cheer, I didn't care. Because my wrist display buzzed. A small alert pinged from one of the hidden cameras I'd planted. I lowered my popcorn bucket slightly and flicked my fingers, bringing up a private feed in the air in front of me. Tiny, invisible to everyone else unless they were standing right over my shoulder. I saw it instantly. Thanos' ships. Darkseid's forces. They were fighting. Not posturing, not arguing, full engagement. My eyes brightened. I felt my mouth pull into a grin that I didn't bother hiding. Oh, I said softly, sounding pleased. Tony turned toward me immediately, exhausted irritation, ready to fire. What now? Tony asked sharply. Please tell me now is not another alien. I stood up from my chair, brushing popcorn crumbs off my coat with one lazy sweep of my hand. Good job, everybody, I said casually, already stepping toward the portal area. You beat the robot, very proud. I'm gonna go watch something actually interesting. Steve's expression tightened. Rick, Steve said firmly, we're not done here. We need answers. Batman's eyes narrowed. We need to know what you've set in motion, Batman said evenly. I looked over my shoulder at them, face relaxed, grin faint. Yeah, I replied in Rick's voice. Put it in a report, I'm busy. Superman stepped forward, voice controlled but serious. Whatever you're doing, Superman said, if it puts civilians at risk. I waved a hand, dismissively. Okay, sure, I said flatly. Add it to your list. Listen, I'm not your coworker. I'm not your teammate. I'm not your friend. I'm a guy who just watched you all punch a computer to death, and now I've got front row seats to a war between two control freaks with armies. Flash blinked. Wait, Flash said quickly. A war between who? I didn't answer him, not because it was a secret, but because explaining it was slower than leaving. Tony stepped forward half a pace, face tense. You can't just leave, Tony said sharply. You started the whole everything. I shrugged as I walked. Yeah, I replied casually. And now I'm leaving. That's the benefit of not caring about your meetings. Batman's voice cut in low. If you open another portal inside this station. I stopped and looked at him. Relax, I said, sounding amused. I'm not opening a portal. I'm using the one I already left behind. Try to keep up, detective. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move fast enough to stop me. I walked toward the corridor where my stable connection was anchored. My portal network wasn't a secret to me, and I didn't feel like pretending it was. I just wasn't going to explain it to them. Behind me, I heard Steve calling something to the others, organizing, controlling the aftermath. Tony muttered something bitter. Flash asked questions too fast. Batman stayed quiet, which meant he was already planning how to track me. I stepped through my own gateway and let the watchtower noise fall away behind me. The next space I entered wasn't quiet. It was full of motion, alarms, and distant impacts. I pulled up the camera feed again as I walked, eyes scanning. Thanos' troops were engaging parademons. Chitauri craft were getting shredded by apocalyptic fire. Energy blasts lit up the darkness. The scale was big enough that it made the earlier fights look like a scuffle. I felt a small, genuine thrill in my chest. Not morality, not purpose, just interest. I opened a portal toward a vantage point where I could see it clearly without getting hit. As the green oval formed, I tilted my head slightly and smiled wider. All right, I said happily, stepping through. Now this is worth the popcorn. The war was already in progress on the other side. Ships trading fire, troops colliding in waves, and neither army showing any sign of slowing down. I found a stable surface, took a seat like I belonged there, and pulled the popcorn back out, eyes locked on the chaos. I didn't speak again right away. I just watched. Chapter 7. Better angles, worse consequences. The first thing I did after I sat down was stop pretending I was just watching. I was watching, sure, but I wasn't going to settle for a wide shot full of smoke and random lasers like some amateur streaming a riot from a rooftop. I wanted clean footage. I wanted audio. I wanted the faces. I wanted the moment when one of them realized the other wasn't going to back down. I sat on a jagged slab of black stone near the edge of a shattered platform, far enough away that stray fire wasn't immediately my problem, close enough that I could see the churn of bodies and metal. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees, popcorn balanced on my thigh like this was a movie night. A paraderman screamed as it got torn apart by a Chitauri blade staff. A Chitauri soldier got yanked off a skiff by 3 paradermans at once and disappeared into the mass below. Explosions lit up the darkness in short flashes. The air smelled like burning metal and ozone, sharp and constant. My wrist display flickered as the camera feeds updated. The tiny cameras I'd planted on Thanos and Darkseid were still live. Good. No jamming, no removal, no paranoid body scan. They were too busy. I tapped my wrist with 2 fingers and opened a control panel in the air. It hovered above my lap, blue and green light reflecting off my hands. I spoke quietly, mostly to myself. All right, let's clean this up. I flicked through the feeds. Camera A, Thanos. Third-person angle from the back of his armor collar, wide enough to catch his shoulders and the space in front of him, audio crisp. Camera B, Darkseid. Mounted on the edge of his shoulder plating, slightly angled down, giving me a view of his torso and the battlefield ahead. I narrowed my eyes, chewing popcorn slowly. The footage was good, but not perfect. Too much motion, too much debris. The angles were stable, but the environment was chaos. So I made it better. I pinched the air and dragged a slider. The cameras switched to a paired mode, syncing timestamps, stabilizing motion, layering audio filters. I cut the loudest blast frequencies out, boosted the range for voices, and isolated the sound signatures of command calls. Then I added 2 more feeds. Not planted, deployed. I snapped my fingers, and a pair of microdrones shot out from my coat pocket, invisible unless you knew what to look for. They streaked into the battlefield like gnats and climbed high above the fighting. One hovered over the main clash of troop formations. The other angled toward a cluster of ships exchanging fire near the permanent bridge zone. I leaned back and sighed with satisfaction. Yeah, I said softly, smiling. That's better. Below, the battle kept shifting. Thanos' forces were more structured. Even without the stones, even without the gauntlet, he ran war like a machine. Lines of infantry advanced in patterns. Skiffs angled to provide cover fire. Heavy units moved in to break paraderman clusters. You could see the chain of command in the way they moved. Apocalypse was different. Darkseid's side didn't care about neat lines. Paradermans dove, swarmed, died, and got replaced. The heavier units, brutal, armored, built to crush, didn't waste time with formation. They hit, they broke things, they kept going. The air was full of their wings and the sharp churn of their engines. The scale wasn't cute. It wasn't a street fight. It was a real war spilling across open space and shattered platforms and ship decks. I watched for a minute, then switched my focus hard to Thanos' feed. He was on a raised platform of his own ship, surrounded by a half-ring of soldiers and lieutenants. He wasn't flailing around. He wasn't screaming. He stood with his hands behind his back, posture straight, gaze fixed forward, like the war itself was a tool he'd set in motion and was now monitoring for performance. His voice came through cleanly. "Advance the line," Thanos said evenly. "Break their aerial swarm, push toward the central breach." One of his lieutenants, tall, armored, leaned in slightly, voice cautious. "The enemy does not withdraw," the lieutenant said. Thanos' expression didn't change. "Then they will be reduced," Thanos replied. A blast hit the edge of the platform. Shrapnel flew. A soldier stumbled and recovered. Thanos didn't turn his head. He continued, calm. Focus fire on their larger constructs, Thanos said. Do not waste ammunition on expendable drones. I snorted quietly and ate another piece of popcorn. Yeah, he's not wrong, I muttered. I switched to Darkseid's feed. Darkseid stood on a field of broken stone, the air around him full of heat and smoke. He didn't appear hurried. His head moved slowly as he tracked the fight. Parademons landed and took off around him, treating him like a fixed point of gravity, something you didn't interfere with. A massive Apocalyptian unit, bulkier than the Parademons, landed near him and spoke with a gravelly voice. The invaders' forces pressed toward the breach, the unit reported. Darkseid's reply was low and flat. Let them. The unit hesitated. They seek access to our world, it said. Darkseid's eyes narrowed slightly, the faint glow intensifying. They will learn what it costs, Darkseid said. He lifted one hand. Omega energy flickered, not fully fired, just present. Several parademons above him shifted direction immediately, like his gesture was a command pulse. Darkseid's voice stayed calm. Send more, Darkseid said. Let them break upon us. I smiled wider. Okay, I said quietly. So we're in the throw bodies at it phase. Classic. The troops kept colliding. Chitauri and parademons tore into each other in huge waves. Skiffs exploded. Flying units slammed together and broke apart. The noise was constant, even with my filters. I watched, chewing slowly, tracking patterns. Then my camera caught something that made my eyebrows lift. Thanos' feed showed a shift in the space ahead. A new formation of Apocalyptian forces moved into position, heavier, more disciplined than the Parademon swarms. They formed a line that actually held ground, weapons raised, firing in controlled bursts. Darkseid's side wasn't just throwing bodies anymore. Someone was organizing. Darkseid's feed showed him glancing toward that same area, expression unchanged. So the organization wasn't surprise. It was intentional. I tapped my wrist and shifted my overhead drone's angle, zooming. In the center of that heavier formation was a figure I recognized instantly from DC lore. Big armor, brutal stance, no wasted motion. Steppenwolf. He was barking orders, rallying the heavier units, forcing a stable front line that could actually push back the Chitauri skiffs. Thanos' troops slowed, their pattern adjusted. You could see the hesitation for half a second before their commanders corrected. Thanos' head turned slightly. He watched the new line. His voice came through, calm but sharper. Identify that commander, Thanos said. A lieutenant answered quickly. An Apocalyptian warlord, the lieutenant said. He leads their heavier forces. Thanos' expression stayed controlled. Then remove him, Thanos replied. He lifted one hand slightly, and a different class of unit moved, sleek, fast, built to assassinate rather than fight. I grinned. Oh yes, I said softly. Now we're getting personal. I adjusted my camera again, pulling both Thanos and Darkseid feeds into a split view with the overhead drone overlay. I marked Steppenwolf's location with a glowing dot. I tagged the approaching assassin units from Thanos' side. I ate popcorn and watched the chess pieces move. Steppenwolf's line held. His units fired with discipline, cutting down Chitauri in tight arcs. Skiffs tried to strafe, and the heavier Apocalyptian cannons punched holes through their hulls. Then the assassin units reached the edge of the formation. They didn't charge. They slipped in, moving fast, striking at gaps. Two of Steppenwolf's soldiers dropped before anyone realized what was happening. Steppenwolf turned, sensing the shift. He raised his weapon and struck down one attacker with a brutal swing, armor plates grinding as he moved. More attackers swarmed him. Steppenwolf fought like he meant it. He didn't panic. He didn't retreat. He broke 2 more units in quick succession. Then he got hit from the side by a weapon that looked like it carried some kind of suppression charge. His armor flickered. He snarled and slammed the attacker into the ground. The formation wavered. Chitauri skiffs surged forward to exploit the gap. Darkseid's feed showed his head turning slightly, eyes narrowing. He didn't like instability, not because he cared about the parademons dying, but because he cared about control. His voice was quiet, but absolute. Steppenwolf, Darkseid said. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. Steppenwolf heard it anyway, even through the noise. He straightened slightly, then moved with renewed aggression, forcing his line to stabilize. Parademons dove in to reinforce the gap. Heavy cannons fired again, punching skiffs out of the air. Thanos' feed showed him watching the shift. He didn't look angry, he looked thoughtful. His voice was calm. Apocalypse uses fear as a tool, Thanos said quietly, more to himself than to anyone. I tilted my head slightly, chewing. Yeah, I said under my breath. And you use scarcity and inevitability. You're both insufferable. I flicked my wrist and zoomed deeper, trying to catch Darkseid's face more clearly. The shoulder camera gave me a partial angle, but I wanted a clean view of his expression when the war stopped being a nuisance and started being a threat to his authority. Darkseid didn't show much. He didn't do theatrics, but there were tells, small shifts in the eyes, slight tension in the jawline, the way his shoulders squared when he decided something mattered. His eyes brightened a fraction. He stepped forward. The parademons around him moved back instinctively, creating space. Darkseid raised his hand again, and this time the Omega effect fired. Not a wild beam, a controlled, precise strike. It shot across the battlefield and hit one of Thanos' larger vessels near the edge of the fight. The hull glowed red, then split. The ship's side tore open. Fire and debris spilled into space. Thanos' feed showed him watching it happen. A lieutenant spoke, voice tense. They are targeting our ships, the lieutenant said. Thanos didn't blink. Then we target theirs, Thanos replied. He lifted his hand and pointed toward a cluster of apocalyptian ships. Concentrated fire, Thanos said evenly. Cripple their carriers. His forces obeyed immediately. Heavy weapons fired in coordinated bursts. Apocalyptian ships took hits. One carrier's engine cluster exploded, sending it spinning. Another lost its forward cannons and began drifting, still firing weakly. Darkseid's feed showed his gaze tightening again, not frustration, calculation. He didn't rush. He didn't swing wildly. He simply raised his hand and fired again, this time at the weapon platforms doing the damage. 2 platforms exploded, gone. I felt a little flicker in my chest, something like excitement, sharp and clean. I sat up straighter. Okay, I said quietly, smiling. So now you're both doing big moves. I glanced at my wrist again, checking the bridge zone. The permanent portal bridge I'd built was still open, still stable, still there like a loaded gun on a table. Both sides had forces pushing toward it, not because they cared about the portal itself as a concept, but because they understood access. They understood resources. They understood conquest. I could see the pattern forming. Thanos wanted the bridge secured so he could move troops and ships into Apocalypse without relying on unpredictable tech. Darkseid wanted the bridge controlled so he could move his armies into Marvel's universe and crush whatever stood there. Neither of them would accept sharing. I leaned back again, chewing. Yeah, I said softly. 1 mountain, 2 tigers. That's Gunner. I stopped myself and frowned slightly. I didn't like that phrase. It sounded like something someone else would say. I shook my head once. Whatever, I muttered, they're gonna fight. I watched Thanos' feed again. A new figure approached him, Ebony Maw wasn't there in this period of the MCU, at least not openly positioned the way later events would show. But Thanos still had competent commanders. One of them leaned in and spoke quietly. "Our push toward the breach meets heavy resistance," the commander said. "Their leader does not engage directly, but his strikes cripple our assets." Thanos' gaze stayed, fixed on the battlefield. "Then we adjust," Thanos said calmly. "We draw him out." The commander hesitated. "How?" the commander asked. Thanos' voice was flat. "Threaten what he values," Thanos replied. The commander looked uncertain, but didn't argue. Thanos continued, still calm. "Move toward their central structures," Thanos said. "Force him to respond." I laughed quietly, a short sound, and shoved popcorn into my mouth. "Yeah," I said, amused. "He thinks Darkseid values structures. That's adorable." Darkseid valued authority, not architecture, but he did care about Apocalypse as a symbol. If Thanos started tearing into the core sites, Darkseid would respond, even if it was just to make a point. Darkseid's feed showed him watching the new push. His eyes narrowed. He spoke, voice low. "They press," Darkseid said. Steppenwolf approached him, armor scraped, breathing heavy but controlled. "Their forces attempt to reach the core sectors," Steppenwolf said. Darkseid's reply was immediate. "Let them approach," Darkseid said. "Then break them." Steppenwolf hesitated. "Their ships," he began. Darkseid's eyes flicked toward him. Steppenwolf stopped. Darkseid's voice stayed calm. "You will hold," Darkseid said. Steppenwolf bowed his head slightly. "As you command," Steppenwolf replied. He turned and moved back into the fight. I watched Darkseid for another second, then adjusted the overhead drone again to track a specific cluster. Thanos' assassin units were moving toward the bridge zone now, slipping around the main conflict. Darkseid's parademons were swarming that area too, not because Darkseid cared about the parademons surviving, but because he cared about controlling the access point. I tagged both forces and opened a third overlay, ship movement vectors. "Okay," I said quietly. "This is the part where you both pretend you're not racing for the same door." A blast hit close to my platform. The stone trembled. A piece of debris whistled past my head and broke apart somewhere behind me. I didn't flinch much. I raised my hand and flicked away the debris field with a lazy pulse of force, clearing my little viewing area. My personal shield shimmered once and settled. I took another bite of popcorn. My eyes stayed on the feeds. Thanos' push toward the core sectors tightened. Darkseid's defenses responded with heavier units. The ship battle intensified. The bridge zone became a crush point, with both sides trying to wedge control into it. Then I saw it. A rare moment, where Darkseid moved more than one step. His feed showed him lifting off the ground slightly, hovering a few feet up. His posture didn't change much, but the fact that he moved at all meant he decided the situation required his presence. He wasn't